And thanks again for jumping in this morning. Last week, we began by jumping inside of this story of a guy named Joseph in the Old Testament of your Bible. We're going to go back to that story just a little bit today. And if you want to scroll in the Old Testament of your Bible or click on a link there, Genesis chapter 37 is where we're going to be. And while you're turning there, there's this reality that's kind of been happening in lots of homes right now during kind of quarantine. It happened a little bit in our home this past week. Some of my family adopted a little bit of a project. One of our girls' rooms just got repainted and freshened up a little bit. And in the middle of that, I didn't do very much. I'm not a good painter, and so I just helped move some things and change some things. And at one point, I was trying to get something off of a wall. I'd grab something, unscrew something, and I thought I knew exactly what screwdriver it was because I'd done it before. And I got there, and I got up on a ladder and got ready to go, and I didn't have the right screwdriver. I grabbed the wrong one. My memory didn't serve me well in that moment, and I had to kind of go back down the ladder, back out to the toolbox, grab the other screwdriver. I just needed the right tool. I just needed the right tool in order to get this really simple job done. What I want to do today, honestly, is just put a tool in our hand. It's one of many tools that I think is really a Jesus-shaped tool that will help us as we navigate this time. Last week, we built a little bit of a mantra. As we began to talk about this reality that we will get through this, we just began to build this mantra and just acknowledged that look, getting through this, and whatever this is for you, could be COVID-19, it could be another crisis that was very true in your life before COVID-19 even hit. Whatever the crisis is, whatever the future crisis will be, there's a couple things that will be true. One is it won't be painless. Two is it won't be quick. But we will get through this because God is taking whatever Satan is weaving for evil and God is reweaving it for good. We will get through this. It won't be painless, it won't be quick, but we will get through this. Because what Satan weaves for evil, God is already reweaving for good. And that's just this mantra. I mean, mantras are helpful in the easy times of life, but mantras are essential in hard times of life. Just mantras, Jesus-shaped, faith-filled mantras that we can grab a hold of. And they can remind us of the hope that we live with and the power and the presence of the Jesus that we're following and living with. And so we built a little bit of that mantra last week. This week, again, just want to hand you a tool that I think will be, again, really helpful for us as we navigate some of this time. And so I want to go back to the story, Genesis chapter 37. And here's just a quick summary of where we are in the story of this guy named Joseph. Joseph was the youngest of 12 brothers. There's some sisters in the family, but he's the youngest of 12 brothers. He's also the favorite for a combination of reasons, and it's the real favorite, not just what some other of the brothers thought maybe was true. He's the favorite. The dad gives him special treatment. The dad gives him unique gifts. Joseph is the favorite. The brothers don't really like that. The dad doesn't see the impact of that, and Joseph doesn't really know what to do with it, doesn't really know how to live in that role. And then he has some dreams, and these dreams are first about his brothers one day bowing down to him, and he tells them that, and you can imagine that doesn't go over very well. And then he has another dream about some of the other parts of his family, including his dad bowing down to him, and so he tells that, and of course that doesn't go very well. I mean, it's a really, really dysfunctional family on so many levels. There's favoritism. There's not great wisdom about conversation. There's not real issues being addressed. It's full of dysfunction. And so in the middle of all that, Joseph's brothers and all of their jealousy and all of their growing bitterness and all of their really growing animosity towards Joseph, they start weaving together a plot to get rid of him. And so at one point when Joseph goes out to the field to check on them, because he wasn't actually out having to work with them because he was the favorite, his father sends him out to check on them, and they devise the scheme. First to kill him, but then to sell him. And that's where we're going to pick up the story. They've thrown Joseph in a cistern, and now they've seen some people coming, some Midianites coming, and they're traveling to Egypt. And Joseph's brothers are going to sell him basically into slavery. And that's where we're going to pick up this story this morning. Genesis chapter 37, verse 28. This is what we find. So when the Midianite merchants came by, his brothers pulled Joseph up out of the cistern and sold him for 20 shekels of silver to the Ishmaelites, who took him to Egypt, took him to Egypt, down south into Egypt. When Reuben, the oldest, returned to the cistern and saw that Joseph was not there, he tore his clothes. He went back to his brothers and said, "The boy isn't there. Now what am I going to do? I was the one who said don't kill him, but I didn't really want to sell him either." And then they got Joseph's robe. They slaughtered a goat and dipped the robe in the blood. They took the ornamented robe back to the father and said, "We found this. Examine it to see whether it is your son's robe." And they knew it was obvious because it was this favorite robe. It was colored, it was ornamented, it was elaborate. It was something that none of the other brothers would have had. His dad recognized it and said, "It is my son's robe. Some ferocious animal must have devoured him out there. Joseph surely has been torn to pieces." And then Jacob, Joseph's dad, tore his clothes. He put on sackcloth and he mourned for his son many days. All his sons and daughters came to comfort him, but he refused to be comforted. The shock was so great. He refused to be comforted. "No," he said, "in mourning I'm going to go to the grave to my son." So his father wept for him. Meanwhile, the Midianites sold Joseph in Egypt. So Joseph now being sold for the second time, once by his brothers to the Midianites, and now the Midianites are selling him into slavery in Egypt to Potiphar, one of Pharaoh's officials, the captain of the guard. So Joseph has now had this moment where he stood on the auction block literally and been purchased as an object to be a servant for some of the leaders inside of Egypt. So Joseph, his crisis is getting worse, not better. The brothers now have a crisis of managing their evil, right, and trying to hide the story and continue to weave the story. Joseph's dad now has a crisis of grief. He thinks his son is dead, and even though he's not dead, what is true is that his son is gone. They've lost all proximity, right? So there's lots of different people in this story and lots of different kinds of crisis. We collectively are in a crisis. We're facing a global pandemic. But again, you might be in another crisis. You might be up against something else in your life that was really significant before COVID hit. And COVID didn't make your crisis necessarily go away. In fact, it might have even expanded it or highlighted it. What is your this? What is this thing that you have that sometimes you just don't know what to do with? It's that crisis that we are going to get through because what Satan is weaving for evil, God is reweaving for good. But how? How are we going to do it? So again, this morning, I just want to hand you a tool. And let me just tell you a little bit the origin of this tool. A lot of this series is actually being shaped by a book that I read by a guy named Max Lucado who talks about getting through things like this and gleans a lot of insight from the life of Joseph. We actually also recently did just a podcast interview with some people from the counseling organization Winning at Home, which is an organization that we have a partnership with and refer lots and lots of people to Winning at Home. My counselor is from Winning at Home. I was actually with my counselor this past Monday for a session. Remarkably helpful. Well, a couple of weeks ago, I was just interviewing again, podcast form, a couple of people from Winning at Home, just about how can we navigate this time. How can we navigate a crisis time? How do we manage our spiritual health, our soul health, our mental health, our family health, and what does that look like? And in the course of that conversation, one of the people I was interviewing is a guy named Brad, and Brad just tossed 3 questions on the table to ask in crisis. And they're remarkably helpful 3 questions. Since then, I've asked them on myself a lot. I've asked them on my family. We've done an exercise with this with our staff here at Journey. 3 remarkably helpful questions. And they're questions that in some form of another, I wonder if Joseph was starting to wrestle with, or I wonder if at some point he wrestled with them. Because think about Joseph's experience. Think about how fast things have changed for Joseph. He's gone from a favored son, a privileged life, to betrayed and abandoned by his brothers, thrown into the bottom of his sister, pulled out for the mere fact of being sold to somebody who would then sell him again into slavery. Imagine what could be swirling through. Imagine the emotions he's experiencing, the wide-ranging thoughts from anger to shock to confusion to sadness to bitterness to rage to fear to numbness to uncertainty. Imagine all that he's going through. And I find myself wondering that somewhere along the way, maybe in some of the immediate and maybe over the course of time, did Joseph ask some questions like this? And because he's experiencing some of the same emotions and some of the same feelings some of the same thoughts that you and I are probably experiencing right now. That fear, that uncertainty, that sadness, that loss, that grief, that wonder, that question, that shock, that anxiety, that worry, right? So I want to encourage you actually just to grab something that you can write on, or pick up your phone if you're watching this on a computer or TV, and just type in these questions a little bit. I want to share these 3 questions with you, walk them out in the life of Joseph and in the life of us, both individually and collectively a little bit. Here's the first question. What is this? Could be COVID-19, could be some other crisis in your life, could be a current crisis, could be a past crisis you're still recovering from. But what has this? You define this, COVID-19 or some other crisis. What has this taken from me? What has this taken from me? I mean, think about it in the terms of Joseph, right? What has it taken? It's taken away his dad. It's taken away his familiar living place. It's taken away whatever kind of relationship he might have had with his brothers. It's taken away his homeland, not just his home, but his homeland. He's now in another nation with different leaders and a different system and a different way of thinking, right? He's lost proximity to people and things that he knew. He's lost his comforts. He's lost his routines. He's lost certainty. He's lost anything that was easy. There's tremendous loss in the life of Joseph. I mean, think about it. It can get easy to look past it because we read it in the Bible, or if you're reading it on your phone or something, it's a page. Less than a page. And yet think about all the things that Joseph lost. What have you lost? In this, what have you lost? What's been taken from you? Sometimes it is just what's familiar. I mean, I think of things that I've lost from very simple and that don't mean a lot in the end. Some things that feel really significant, right? You know, just lost the chance right now as spring's trying to push through to go play golf. I've lost that. I miss it. It's not a major piece. It's not going to dramatically impact my life, but I miss it. It's a loss, right? I've lost some rhythms. There were some rhythms that were familiar to me, and some of them not great, but some of them really good and really helpful, and I've lost those. I've lost some of those routines and those patterns. I've lost us gathering together physically in a physical proximity inside of a physical space. I've lost that. What have you lost? Maybe you've lost income. Maybe you've completely lost the job. Maybe you've lost the way the job used to be. Maybe you've lost the things that you knew about the job. Maybe you love your job and you've lost it, and so you actually don't just miss the income, you miss the action of the job. Maybe the job has changed enough that you just miss it. You maybe lost, we've all lost on some level, right? Interaction with friends and social interaction, and we're trying to stay engaged with one another online, and right, but we've lost something there. Right? Those are real losses. Maybe in your crisis, you've lost a person. You've lost a loved one to tragedy or to setback, and that loss is real. What has this taken from you? Again, Joseph lost a ton in a hurry. And sometimes it's just helpful for us to admit, so have we. Sometimes really small things, but sometimes some really significant, dramatic things. And when we acknowledge those, again, when we just list those, and I encourage you somewhere along the way, even maybe now, or we'll give an opportunity for all of us to do it a little bit later, or even periodically throughout this crisis. When we list them, when we just acknowledge what we've lost, then we grieve. We grieve very specific losses. We grieve very specific, tangible things. Joseph, somewhere along the way, had the opportunity to grieve very specific losses. What's been taken from you? What have you lost? May get some of it back. I'm going to get some of those rhythms back. We're somewhere along the way, somewhere going to get gathering back. It may look different than it's ever looked. We might get some of them back. That doesn't even matter right now. What matters is that we just acknowledge the loss. Because when we see what we've lost, we grieve. And grief is actually a healthy part of the process. It's also fair to ask a second question. What have we not lost? What's the same? What have we not lost? What's the same? What's not different? What has not been taken? In this, whatever this is for you, what has not been taken? In this COVID experience for us, what has not been taken? What was still true of Joseph is that he's still a young guy. He's still really gifted, still all sorts of potential, and that's going to actually end up showing itself throughout the rest of his story. I mean, Joseph's got some wisdom. Joseph is really created by God. Like Joseph, listen here, Joseph didn't lose his destiny. Joseph didn't lose his destiny. That's still true of him. He really still is a son, even though he's lost proximity to his dad. He really still is a son. That didn't change. He didn't suddenly somehow not become a son. He's still a brother. Even in all of the dysfunction, he's still a brother. Right? What's the same for you? There are some things that are the same for me. I'm still a dad. Still 2 girls. Still married to Erica. We still get the fortunate to live in the same house. I still have the same job, even though it's radically different and so much has changed. It's still under the same umbrella, right? Still the same. I still live in the same part of the country, same part of the place. I've known people who had to move during this time, right? How chaotic is that? Still the same. What's still the same about you and for you? Can I tell you some other things that are the same that are really significant? If you're here today and you're a follower of Jesus, do you know what's still true? You're still a child of the living God. You're still fully rescued by Him. You're still deeply loved by Him. You're still chosen and adopted by Him. He still takes great delight in you. You're still filled with His spirit of power and of love and of a sound mind. All of those things are still true. This, whatever this is, has not changed those truths about your life and about how God views you and engages with you. Those are still true. What's also still true, like it was for Joseph, is that you still have a destiny. You still have a purpose. And while this might feel like it has delayed the destiny on some level, a delayed destiny is not a derailed destiny. A delayed destiny is not a derailed destiny. Your destiny, your God-given purpose in the world is still true. It's still true about you. It's still God's given purpose for you, which includes your intimacy with Him, your connection with Him, your oneness with Him, and your difference-making ability in the lives of people around you. There are some good things that haven't been taken that are still true. And see, when we discover and we just identify, when we clearly identify what we've lost and what's been taken, we grieve. But when we identify what we still have and what has not been taken and what is still true, we're grateful. We're just grateful. Maybe even more than grateful, we celebrate. If we grieve what we've lost, we celebrate what we still have. We grieve what we lost, we celebrate what's still true. There's one more question. Just write this down somewhere. Type it into your phone. Right? In all of this, whatever your this is, what are you gaining? What are you gaining? What are we gaining? If what Satan is weaving for evil, God is already reweaving for good, then certainly there are some things we're gaining, right? I mean, that's the goodness of God. That's the goodness and the kindness of Jesus. Joseph is actually going to gain whole new opportunities. Joseph actually is going to gain the opportunity to live the destiny God created him to live. Joseph is going to gain all new experiences. Some are terrible, but some are amazing, completely life-altering, God-only moments and experiences. So while there is a tremendous amount lost, and while some things about Joseph are still the same, there are some things he is really gaining. He's gaining bigger views and new awareness of who God is and how God relates to him and how God shows up in crisis. He's gaining that. On top of all these new experiences and these new moments, he's gaining this understanding of how God sustains through crisis and through trial, how God really does ensure that he will and we will get through this. There's some definite gain for Joseph. What are you gaining? What are you gaining? Maybe it is more time with family. Maybe it is a little bit of a slowed down pace. I've said a lot of times, one of the things I've been grateful for is we've always fought hard for family dinners, but during this time, it's been a little easier for family dinners to stretch out and be prolonged. And I love it. It's a gain. It's a gain. We've spent enough time as a family, had enough conversations that we've become aware of some things that we were losing pre the crisis and didn't really know it. And being in the crisis, which has actually removed us from some other environments, right? Because we're all in quarantine, we've seen the toll some of those environments were taking on some of us in our family. We've gained insight into that. We've gained awareness into it, so we can navigate. We can see it. We can ask Jesus for his direction in that work. It's a gain for us. Right? I've gained different mornings that I miss the kind of rhythm of taking the girls to school. I love that morning rhythm we have with them. And I've lost that, but I've gained a different rhythm in the morning. I've gained a little bit easier time, having a little bit longer times with Jesus just in the scriptures and in prayer. I mean, it's a little easier. The morning is a little less convoluted and complicated. There are things we're gaining. Some people are gaining new dreams and new opportunities to serve and new opportunities and ways of seeing how they can meet the needs of people and places and businesses around them. They're amazing opportunities. And so while we have indeed, no question about it, while we have lost some things, there are still some things that are the same, and there are some things we're gaining. And when we find what we lost, we grieve it. And when we find what's the same, we celebrate it. And when we find what we're gaining, we grab it. Grab a hold of it. Take hold of it. Lean into it. Those things that we think we're gaining as a family, those insights we're gaining, we're having conversations about those. We're talking about those. I'm trying to think about when some of life returns and some of quarantine is lifted and things start to move, how do we become aware? How do we navigate the future a little differently because of what we're learning in this time? I mean, how do we navigate the future in not just a different way, but a more healthy way because of what we're learning and experiencing in this time? What are you gaining? When we see what is there that even potentially we could gain, we grab it. Joseph did. I mean, Joseph lived fully in, and we'll talk about some of this in the weeks ahead, but Joseph lived fully in to God and his presence and what he had for him in the time, even though it wasn't how he would have originally scripted his life. When we find what's been taken, grieve it. When we find what's the same, we celebrate it. We're really grateful. When we find what we're gaining, what we even might be gaining, the good that might be happening, we grab it. We pursue it. We lean into it with everything that we've got. In fact, this morning, I think it would be helpful for us with maybe the life of Joseph in our minds and in our hearts and the work of Jesus in his life and this tool, just these 3 questions that my new friend Brad gave me just almost in passing that day in that podcast. Maybe with those questions in hand, be helpful for us just to take a couple of minutes and to just surrender ourselves to Jesus in a posture of just saying, Jesus, here, would you lead my thoughts and my heart on this? In the next few minutes, Jesus, would you even help me see these and answer these questions? Would you help me see, honestly, what has been taken from me? What's not the same? What have I lost? Some of it's so obvious and some of it's so subtle. Jesus, would you just help me? Jesus, would you help me see what's the same? It's been a long time since maybe I've just celebrated some things. I've been grateful, from the most simple things to the most profound. Help me see how you still see me, what's still true about me, who you still say I am, what's still the same around me. Help me celebrate it. And Jesus, would you help me get a glimpse of what I'm gaining, what my family's gaining, what our communities are gaining, what our church is gaining, an opportunity and chance to be Jesus to people. Would you help me see it? Because I want to grab it. And so for the next couple of minutes, we're just going to worship through a couple of songs. And maybe just as part of fueling your own faith in Jesus, you'll sing these songs. You'll turn up whatever you're listening to and sing it as loud as you can. Maybe you'll just absorb them and you'll let this be a time and a space where you literally just kind of free flow and just write or type or whatever you're doing to record. Just let Jesus and his Spirit shape some thoughts around what you're losing, so you can grieve it, what's the same so you can celebrate it, and what you're gaining so you can grab a hold of it. Jesus, in the next couple of minutes, we make ourselves real available to you. Thank you again for this life of Joseph. Thank you for the candor with which you inspired the story to be written, the significance of loss, the pain of loss, the fear and the agony that had to be true for Joseph. Thank you for the fullness of that story and how you still use his life. And we believe that's just who you are, that you really are, even right now in this moment, weaving good in our life in the middle of crisis, in the middle of our this, whatever this is. So we, with just faith in you and your character, we yield ourselves to you. Would you lead our thoughts and lead our hearts in these next couple minutes so that we just have all of your permission to see what we've lost and grieve, to see what's the same and celebrate, and to see what we're gaining and grab it. We trust you. We trust you. We give ourselves to you in this time. Thanks for these moments. In Jesus' name.